It is football and the F words. My name is Zach Lyons. You can follow me on X/Twitter at FWordsPod. You may have not seen me tweet lately, but I have been tweeting. It's just that I, in a funny joke, put Joe Rexroad as my profile picture, and now my profile is frozen and my blue check mark is in question, and nobody from Twitter support will help me out. So what the fuck do I pay for premium for if I, besides editing tweets, if I can't get any support? Great on them. So I am currently, you'll see a picture of a mad, angry Joe Rexroad who swears he only had just one cookie. It was
At least it's a good photo to get stuck with.
It is high drama coming out of that. They all complained that people wouldn't shut the fuck up talking. PK specifically complained about that. It was so loud and inane and everything. And they supposedly were just there for 5 hours. Over 7 hours of day 3 coverage for me, Stoney, Easton, and JT on Saturday. Put those guys to shame. Whatever they had to talk about or deal with was probably not as idiotic as what we talked about during that. But it was such high drama came out of it. I do recommend to listen to the PK/615 Sessions podcast. You listen at Paul Karski podcast feed of him, Joe, and Buck breaking down, because in the middle is the rant.
I missed that.
Great pictures coming out of it as well. Obviously, the Joe Rexroad video, but then also the Keanu Reeves sitting on the bench version by PK. Sad PK is what we'll call him out on the corner.
Yeah.
It was crazy. And we're just sitting there talking about refrigerator moves and Jaden Crumedy and all these other prospects that nobody in there probably has ever heard of. We're just having a good time, but it sounded like hell on earth in that press box or press media room.
We really did have a good time on Saturday, and honestly, it did not feel like 7 hours to me. I mean, it could have been
felt like 3 days to me.
But time flies. Time flies when you're having fun with your good buddies. But we also got some insight into my shower habits as well. So it was a good day. Good insightful day.
It was a fantastic day. As you can see, that Mike's not on the show yet. He's about 7 minutes out, he said, from being on the show. So we decided we would start on without him. We have a lot to get to today. I mean, we got takes, we got picks, we got questions, we got it all. And you know who else has it all, Stoney? That would be Bluegrass Beverages in Hendersonville, Tennessee. They have all the liquor, all the mixers, all the wine, all the beer, everything you need. They even have salty snacks over there. They have, guess what? Ways for you to prevent the hangover over at Bluegrass Beverages. They have it all. Everything you could need for a party is over at Bluegrass Beverages in Hendersonville, Tennessee. Over 50 years in service. Award-winning Sinkers Beverages in East Nashville, but Bluegrass Beverages is awesome. And let me say this. They put on a fantastic 2-night draft event. And the second night, we got to sit down with a few select people that paid for the tickets and have one-on-one question time with Derek Mason, where we talked everything from practice habits to stuff behind the scenes during the Vrabel and John Robinson eras, to stuff that happened in the locker rooms back in when they first got here, from Memphis. So it was amazing. He answered all kinds of questions. There were so many more questions we could have asked. We just couldn't get around to it. And then, of course, they all got to ask us questions. Lots of behind-the-scenes stuff. Lots of fantastic things that couldn't have been done without our sponsors, Bluegrass Beverages, and, of course, Braden as well for putting it on. But it was awesome. So next year when there's a draft event and there's a special guest announced, you better pony up that money because it is worth the experience. I think anybody from Karsten to Paul to Devin to Colby, a bunch of other guys that have not named, a ton of them would tell you that it was well worth the money.
I think next year we need to put Joe up there and let Joe answer questions from people. But it was a special 2 nights, man. I'll treasure those nights for the rest of my career. Really cool, special stuff. I'm grateful to have been included in it, but also, I don't want to sell it too much, but there was one thing that Derek Mason brought up that just completely made me raise my eyebrows. And it's something that will only be held within the confines of that room on Friday night forever. So who knows what we're gonna do to top ourselves next year, but I think it was well worth, and there were people there that were saying well worth the price of admission too.
Yes.
It was a
I
really
will say this. I am efforting because I don't know how many of our listeners and readers, I'm sure all of them probably saw the clip of that Mike Keith put out talking to is all clips of Dave McGinnis saying funny things, but it's an appreciation post.
yeah, yeah.
And I keep saying that talking to Mike Keith talking to Dave, Coach Mack, is very reminiscent of me talking to you
It
about
is.
prospects. So I know that Braden stands next to Coach Mack all the time. So
Mhm.
next year, it's going to have to be a pre-draft event, right? Can't be the
Yeah.
night of the draft because he'll be busy. I am efforting Braden to do a show or to do a charity event somewhere, a live show where I am up on stage and I ask you and Coach Mac questions about a prospect. Now I'll say a prospect's name and I'm just going to let you guys go and see who comes up with the most ridiculous ways to describe that prospect.
Man,
And
that
while
would
also being informative.
that would be an absolute honor. I love Coach Mack. He's one of my favorite people in this media market. I think he's one of the few personalities that can really bring football to life. So I'm honored that you've even had that thought.
Well, I know this. Neither of you give a shit about like you just want to deliver. And when I say that, you just want to deliver the damn honest truth,
Yeah,
right?
what I
You want
see.
to deliver what you see with honesty, but in a funny way. And I think that people would go crazy to just listen to you and Coach Mack talk about prospects. Because ultimately, that's what will happen, right? It will go naturally from talking about guys made in trash compactors with thick thighs to you guys just talking about the prospect. So I think it would be a fantastic charity event.
Yeah, I'm game.
So
Name a
make sure
time,
you
name
guys
a
help
place.
me stay on Braden to get that done because I am 100% efforting that next year at some point between the combine and the draft. We have to get that done and all for charity and all for charity.
Yeah,
So it'll be
there we
great.
go. There we go.
Oh man, a lot to get to today. And we're now 8 minutes in. So I think I bought plenty of time for Mike to come in after you in a natural segue. That's what I'm hoping here. So
Are you rested and recovered, by the way? Like,
yes, I
okay.
am finally starting to feel back to normal. I struggled to write my Tavondre Sweat piece, which ended up
Yeah,
being over 3,500 words, which I'm very surprised my mind was able to get there.
sure.
And because we still went out Monday night. Monday night was the last night that Lauren's friend was in town. So we still went out Monday night. And yesterday, Tuesday, I did absolutely nothing. We caught up on a couple of our shows, a bunch of our cooking shows. We started watching Dead Boy Detectives on Netflix, which is really good. Then we tuned into Dinner Time Live, where Jay Farrow does an amazing John Mulaney impression.
So I
And
hear.
apparently, Lil Jon has a meditation album, so I'm gonna have to start listening to that.
Oh.
But I am now well rested. So, how about you? Are you well rested?
Yeah, it was a really strange feeling on Sunday for everything to be over and then to know there wasn't anything that I had to get done that day. I really struggled with it. I felt really antsy. I had to pick my wife up from the airport. Um, and that kind of gave me something to fix my mind on, but I didn't do well with the whole doing nothing thing. And I did end up kind of cleaning up a few of my 2025 evals from prospects that I thought were going to be in this class, but then decided to go back to school. So I kind of cleaned that list up a little bit, and I put together a preliminary top 20 of guys that I wanted to watch to kind of satiate that within me. And I felt a little better that night. I got a really good night's sleep. I didn't really get a good night's sleep until Tuesday night. I don't know if you can tell, but I'm kind of like sick again to the surprise of
Well,
nobody.
I think that would be about right for me. I think I got good sleep Monday, great sleep last
Yeah.
night, heading in
I'm
today. So I'm feeling really energized today.
yeah, I'm getting
Um,
there.
Overall thoughts, takeaways, whatever, just the overall impression of the Tennessee Titans draft class.
I was kind of surprised, and I wouldn't use the word disappointed. I think it was still a really good class. And I don't really have any major nitpicks with the haul that they got. But I would say I guess from my side of the aisle, from where I'm sitting, like I want to know what metrics they were looking at to evaluate their later round picks, because James Williams, I like Jaquan Jackson. He was a guy that I had written about. I said on the broadcast on Saturday, not the receiver I would have gone with. There were 5 receivers that I had ranked ahead of him, but I at least get the vision for that one. But then, like the James Williams pick and the Jalen Harrell pick, I would be curious to know what exactly they are looking at to make that call, because even when you plug James Williams numbers into the linebacker formula for his RAS, still not above 8, still not an elite athlete. And the Titans were actually dead last in RAS in terms of their players drafted. So I would be curious, like, okay, this is something that I kind of leaned into. I kind of thought that they would be chasing athletes that tested really well. And I think what they did from the picks was they went after guys that could be tone setters. Like they're really guys that quote unquote love football. Aggressive players, JC Latham, Tavondre Sweat, James Williams, all particularly aggressive guys. And even Cedric Gray is pretty feisty, rangy, all over the field, following or flying around the play type of player. So it kind of made me wonder if maybe some of the athletic stuff was sacrificed in favor of getting cultural tone setters for this rebuild moving forward. And I would be curious if that was the case, or if there was some other metric that they were looking at. But that's just me as a draft analyst trying to be like, okay, how can I not completely whiff on James Williams and Jalen Harrell next year?
I look at it this way. I think someone's going to have to come up with, have to actually have the right words to ask that question. And I think
Sure.
what you have to do is be very specific, because as an objective guy who does look at RAS and everything, I have to look at it in a couple different ways. First off, I think you can have both. So I think you can have your cultural tone setters and your athletes. And
Sure.
now RAS is a flawed metric. It's about the best we got.
Yeah.
And there are people who, I think YAS Analytics is coming up with their own version that's a little bit better, that they do force instead of just relying
Ooh.
strictly on speed and stuff. So it's a flawed metric, but it's the best we got. It's the best us general people have access to.
Sure.
Not the best that the Titans or NFL franchises have to. So that's kind of where I'm at. And I talked about this yesterday when I was given Easton the Titans fit ratings, aka the two-tone blue dude stuff that I come up with, and I take the historical data and everything, and RA and athleticism seem to be pretty high.
Yeah.
Well, this class would let you know that either it's the outlier or they have access to data we're not privy to. And this goes back to the Brock Bowers discussion that we had a couple episodes ago, where teams have access to in-game GPS data on the NCAA level that we do not have. And we have seen that Jaquan Jackson is faster on film than he tested.
I would agree.
Especially for a guy his size. Remember Tank Dell last year. Tank Dell's a good example. Tank Dell's faster than what he tested. So I think that while RAS is the best that we got, I think that we have gone now to where we're not valuing RAS enough to where we're overvaluing RAS, and it's the end all be all. JC Latham not testing is a perfect example. So I think that right now, like if I were to go and you tell me Zach, where do you foresee that you adjust your analytics for your Titans fits? Because I did nail a lot of these Titans fits. They're typically high rating and all this stuff, but where would you adjust it? I'm going to be pulling back until we have better metrics, maybe pulling back how much I value athleticism for this team. And I think it's just going to be kind of like happenstance. Because again, NFL teams aren't really using RAS. They may say that they do, but they're really using GPS data now and other advanced data from Sumer Sports and other things that we don't have, right? When we don't have access, we don't have the money to buy the enterprise or business edition level access as they have at Sports Info Solutions, Sumer Sports, all these. PFF has an extra hidden level as well. So to me, I would go about and say that athleticism is important, just not the tangible athletic evidence that we have access to. And so that's
Yeah.
kind of where I'm at on looking at that information in trying to decide what do we need to be looking at a little bit more. And I don't know if I'll ever be able to adjust RAS other than I'm not going to value it in the whole and summing up to 100 points. It will not get the bulk of the stuff until they show me otherwise in a more trendful capacity.
Yeah, that's all I'm saying. Like, hey, just slide the Sobros Network at gmail.com onto your account wherever, if the Titans are watching this. Just let me take a peek. That's all I'm saying. Or we need, several of y'all to sign up, paid subscribers at Stacking the Inbox, so that we can get the account and see what they're
Yeah.
looking. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. Mike is already way later than what he said he was going to be. Typical Herndon time. Not surprised, but he will be joining us and we'll get his thoughts on the overall draft class. But we need to get into the individual players because I want to get to the mailbags and he'll just have to, he's got his thoughts on the individual players over at paulkarski.com. So there you go. So you can just
There we go.
read whatever players he may miss. Go to paulkarski.com to read up on it. So we'll start with JC Latham. First overall pick. We'll go in order. A lot. It's very interesting going back and looking at it all and looking at this team as a whole, but also piecing together the evidence that we probably should have paid attention to. That I tried to
Sure.
bring to light as quickly as possible, but it's too little, too late, right? Too little, too late. But the pieces of the puzzle that TD and them laid out for us, other people in the media laid out for us, and it's hard not to love the pick, in my opinion. I have very little quibbles about it. I have more quibbles about maybe what they said afterwards, and we'll get to that in a minute. But I talked about today at stackinginbox.com when I talked about JC Latham is like, if you go back and listen to me in season during the college football season, I think even you may have said it on one of the shows too, is like, man, I'm not really seeing where this JC Latham love is coming from. What you're hearing about JC Latham. Like he was a top 10, 15 pick, top 10 pick. Just not really feeling that. And it's not that I'm saying that he wasn't a first round pick. He was always a first round pick. I'm just like, man, it's him and Amari Smith was kind of like, man, I don't know about all this information coming out. And to me, I look back at it now because obviously I watched all 22 since then and everything else. But as an Alabama fan, you're looking at this Tommy Rees offense, and
Yeah.
I don't know if have you watched me today?
Yeah, I did.
What you're and I
Yeah.
liken it to Crank. I don't know if anybody's seen Crank. It's a Jason Statham movie from like the mid 2000s, and it's a terrible movie, but it is so like kinetic and frenetic and fun and exciting to watch that you just don't really care that's a bad movie. And
Mhm.
that's what the Tommy Rees offense was. And mainly due in part that Jalen Milroe was running around like a chicken with his head cut off and throwing long bombs, right? It's really hard to gauge the offensive line off what you saw last year.
Sure.
So to me, I'm like, and then I start pulling up the all 22, and it's really hard to focus on offensive linemen on a game film in real time because you're like watching the game, and everything, and you're watching the quarterback. Your eyes and the camera naturally take you to places. So when you hit the all 22, you're like, oh, yeah, I see it. You know what I'm saying? I for real
Yeah.
see it.
Yeah.
And to me, that's the big thing. So I really love the Latham pick. And if I'm Team Callahan, if that's what Callahan wanted, if that's what Callahan loves, then that's who they should get. I don't care about anything other than that. Is that you listen to the guy that has 30, 40 years of experience. You don't listen to the consensus board nerds who never played a down of football, who maybe have never even coached offensive line, to even hypothesize or theorize or question whether Bill Callahan knows more than the draft nerds is beyond idiotic, in my opinion.
Yeah. I'm with you there. I have been pretty high on Latham from the beginning, but I also it was a similar shift for me because I had only watched a few games early on in the season, just the broadcast being an Alabama fan.
Right.
And then I started seeing JC Latham popping up in the top 10 of mock drafts. And I was like, whoa, what? So I got to him. Thankfully, I don't think I ever tweeted anything like, "Oh, JC Latham sucks" or anything like that. But I started watching the All 22 as early as I could, and from the first game, I'm like, "Oh, wait, get it." Like, there's not a lot that really pops on the broadcast, but if you specifically watch the offensive line play in that the end zone angle on the All 22, where you get a good look at the offensive lineman, and he's just dominant. He's just dominant. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but in the moment we were live on the air, we had both ranked the three options: Rome, Olu, and then JC Latham,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah, I would say so.
Okay, so
And don't you think it's funny though that the best offensive line coach got JC Latham and the worst offensive line coach got Olu
oh, I
Fashanu?
know
Because
that sucks,
I
man.
feel so bad for Olu
I do
Fashanu.
too.
I
Well,
we talk about all the time about quarterbacks and their fit and systems and the going to the right place that can with the right coach and all this stuff. And I'm just like, oh God. I
and see,
said, man, we are gonna all of our Olu Fashanu takes are gonna look so bad, and it's gonna be Keith Carter's fault.
that's exactly what I was gonna say. Like all the people that were hating on Olu are gonna look at his performance at the next level and they're gonna be like, man, these draft experts are fucking idiots. They don't know shit. It's like, no, he landed in the worst possible situation. But I wanted to revisit that conversation because we tried to on Thursday night, but I was 5 gin and tonics deep, and we had been it was an impromptu episode of Drinking with the Scouts, so to speak. But I told you after letting it marinate for a little bit, I kind of revisited, and I think even in the moment, I can get absolutely why they would take JC Latham over Olu and Roma Dunze, because if you watch him play, the thing that immediately stands out is the power. I think JC Latham has the power edge there, but Olu is the natural pass protecting left tackle. So if you draft Olu, you don't have to worry about switching positions. And that was kind of the crux of the thing for me. But when I started thinking about it, and you start seeing the personality of JC Latham show, and they're doing all these interviews, and he's saying stuff like, I'm gonna die on the field for my team and all that stuff. You kind of start to see that dog mentality come out of him a little bit. And that's when I started thinking, like, you know what, if they can get that out of JC Latham, if they can harness that from where he played at right tackle in college and plop it down at left tackle, they're going to be solid for the next decade. And that's where I started to shift my thinking on the pick and really got on board with it.
You know, I agree. I still it's tough because I still think I would have preferred a Roma Dunze Patrick Paul situation.
Oh yeah, me
That'd
too.
be about where I'm at. Like that's the only situation that could possibly talk me into not liking, or that's probably the only situation I think that would be better than a JC Latham Tavondre Sweat combination. But I
Yeah,
also don't think that's a realistic way to view it. And because that's just like, what are the odds, right? What are the odds that you could
sure,
technically have had both? Maybe pretty good because of how the draft laid out, but you just never know. You can't take those risks like that.
sure.
And of course, I'm always team trade down, and all that kind of stuff. But it also, Rand Carthon talks about, and let's be honest, this is true. This is not just him covering his own ass. The NFL scouting group, the NFL GMs, they're a bunch of chatty Cathys. Like,
Yeah,
obviously, they are chatty Cathys if you hear about the anonymous scout reports, right? Like, they love talking to each other. They love
sure.
gabbing away. There's a good chance that a lot of teams had JC Latham higher, and there were a lot of teams that had right tackle needs. So
Well,
obviously,
there
he's a
were
right tackle.
I mean, there were a lot of analysts that had JC
Yeah,
Latham ranked pretty highly, and not necessarily OT1, but ahead of guys like Olu and some even ahead of Alt.
yeah. I mean, does it seem like Odunze was even an option for them? Yeah, sure. I mean, anybody was an option at that point. I mean, we can't say for certain that he wasn't off their board because, he maybe he has a Nazi tattoo. I don't know. I mean, I'm just saying we don't know if there's like some hidden thing, but every team's gonna have Roma Dunze ranked on their board as an option. It's just that maybe he wasn't the and clearly wasn't the higher preferred option on their board, which is essentially how you have to look at it. It's not that was a Dunze was an option. It just was that JC Latham was the better option in their eyes. So I think that would be how you would have to look at it. But we're just talking hypothetical. Like a hypothetical situation for
Yeah,
me would be I'd prefer Odunze and Patrick Paul over Tavondre Sweat, JC Latham. Doesn't mean I hate this draft.
for sure.
I love this draft. I think I'm maybe even a little bit higher on this draft than you, and that's
Sure.
okay. I'm just saying that two things can be true. We can love this draft or like this draft and like these two picks, but prefer there would be another scenario that you prefer better. But I want to talk about their left tackle conversation because something that's marinated for me over these next few days is that this team has a bad habit of either not giving you enough information or giving you way too much information. So they're either undersharing or oversharing.
Yeah.
And I was a big proponent of them saying, uh, right off the bat, unprompted left tackle. Like, we think
Yep.
he's a left tackle. We got our left tackle. I am not a fan of then them kind of like tempering expectations and saying, well, if he doesn't work at left tackle, then we'll put him at right tackle, because that's kind of like leaving the vultures some meat on the bones. And that's what everybody's gonna say. Well, if he goes to right tackle, then he sucks and he's a bust, and that pick was a waste. And that's what they all focus on. I wish they would have just stuck to their guns and stuck to the messaging of he's our left tackle. I love that they said that, but then I hate that they kind of like Brian Callahan was kind of like, well, blah blah blah.
How much of that do you think was just like heat of the moment, just kind of thinking out loud? Because it did feel kind of out of place in the press conference. I'm like,
Yeah.
man, that's one of those things you just got to keep to yourself, man. Y'all can think that, but don't tell everybody.
Yeah, it just like if that's what Bill Callahan told you, right now, if that's what Bill Callahan told you, then that's what you need to say. Say, like, listen, we think the best O line coach in the game say he's going to play a left tackle. He's our left tackle. If he does not end up, you don't need to say if he does not end up being a good left tackle. No, because that's just like, it just leaves too much of a door open. So, and again, this is nitpicking, but just
Yeah.
something that kind of has marinated over time. And I'm just like, man, out of all the press conference things, I keep coming back to that, and I just don't really like it. I just don't really like it.
Yeah.
But,
I get it.
but look at it this way. I mean, they're kind of doing the opposite of what they're doing with San Diego, or LA's doing with Joe Alt, but Joe Alt's in a different situation. But I will say that I think it's very interesting that TD says that based on everything I heard and everything, I wish, even with Alt on the board at that ESPN draft, I wish I would have just said Latham, because they obviously just really loved Latham, and maybe it's a OT1A, OT1B situation, or maybe it's clear that Latham is the OT1. But all these reports after the fact are what these reporters after the fact are reporting really sounds like, well, we were all wrong about Joe Alt. So I'm just going to say, oh, my guess is they probably would have taken Joe Alt if he had fallen to them.
Yeah. What do you think would have happened if JC Latham did go to LA and Joe Alt went to New York? Do you think the Titans just go neighbors?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, at
Yeah.
that point, I think they would have to. And hey, neighbors Patrick Paul, I'd have been all on board on that. I don't think they would have gone Olu Fashanu if
Yeah,
in that case.
that's the thing that's surprising to me. I really liked Olu, but now in hindsight, I know we were kind of teasing, joking around a little bit about, oh, it's a smokescreen. They haven't talked to Olu, but now, like, on the other end of it, I just kind of feel like maybe they just didn't really like him.
Yeah. And we don't know if I don't know if it's ever said that Olu did or didn't. We just don't know that he got,
Yeah.
whether he did or didn't. Of course, stuff like that should have got reported, but agents are weird. I tell you, agents are very weird. I think people put too much emphasis on the 30 visits. Cedric Gray didn't have a 30 visit, and they said they didn't need to do a 30 visit. The tape would be enough. And I would assume Odunze would be that, and all that. So that's just where I'm at there. Moving on to Tavondre Sweat. And again, I wish Mike was here. I said I just sent him a text while you were talking saying, oh, yeah, 10 minutes, right?
That's what I laughed about a second ago. I'm like, oh, I
Yeah,
got
we're
the
now
weird
30
text.
minutes in to Mike, who's supposed to be 10 minutes late. And I know he wants to be here for this. And so maybe we should skip ahead. So let's save Tavondre Sweat. He
Okay.
says he's almost free. Okay, yeah, I've heard that one before. Okay, so let's go to Cedric Gray. And I like the pick.
Okay.
And and here's where I'm at is like, can we do this right and just give Cedric Gray the green dot? Can Amani Hooker just maybe be his understudy? Let's not
Yeah.
give it to Amani Hooker. I don't care if there's growing pains or not. He's gonna have to learn it at some point.
Yeah.
And I just don't like taking it's like people who wanted to move around Skoronski and all this stuff, and people who still wanted to take Skoronski and put him at left tackle and all this stuff. No, do it right. Give it to Cedric Gray. Because once Amani Hooker is gone or he's injured, then he's learning on the fly. Sure, he could do it on the second team, scout team, whatever. Give it to Cedric Gray and let this team, this sort of young NFL team that's at least going to be here for a couple of weeks or a couple of years, some of them, let them get used to Cedric Gray, right?
Yeah.
Like, you need to do it.
No,
And I'm all for it. Like, if they feel that Amani Hooker's the best way, then sure. But at some point, you have to give it to Cedric Gray, and you have to give him real in-game experience to do it. And he was one of the few people that 17 scouts all agreed on is your day one, could do it early guy. He was the
yeah.
second guy listed as the green dot guy. So there is no reason that Cedric Gray cannot be the guy, and he needs to do it day one. He needs to start doing it in camp. He needs to get run with the ones. Don't fuck around like you did, like previous coaching staffs did. Don't fuck around and just give it to Cedric Gray.
Yeah, and I think there's two important things to consider here as well. They've already talked about him being a guy that's capable of wearing the green dot. So you're alluding to the vision, which I mean, you don't have to be Nostradamus to see, but the vision is he's going to be the green dot guy. So if you're in a situation where you have said multiple times throughout the offseason, hey, we got to be patient with this rebuild, like it's not going to just turn around in one offseason. If that's the case, then why delay the learning process for a guy that figures to be one of the cornerstone pieces of your defense moving forward? Why delay it? What's the use in that? And so I think that the closer we get to training camp, I don't know if they'll outright say it, but I think with their willingness to say outright up front right away, JC Latham is a left tackle, I don't feel like they're going to play these games. I kind of feel like by the time we get to training camp, I don't know if it'll be actually said in a press conference, but I feel like Cedric Gray is going to be that guy.
Well, and like I'm glad that Amani Hooker wants to step up and wants a shot at it.
Well,
but I also want him to be healthy for more than 13 games. Sometimes we don't get what we want.
Yeah.
Sometimes we don't get that.
Listen, I don't know. Maybe this is just me. Maybe I'm just wrong. I'm not reading the tea leaves properly, but Amani Hooker had a chance to kind of step up and become that vocal leader once Kevin Byard was traded. And I don't remember many reports about him. I mean, people said that, yeah, he stepped up pretty well, but I don't remember many reports about him like rallying the troops on defense or being that sort of vocal leader on defense. And it's not to say that we're not correlating leadership with the green dot per se, but I don't know. Like, did Amani Hooker really step up in that regard?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure he did maybe behind the scenes or something, but we're talking about a totally different scenario. Green dot doesn't necessarily mean you have to be a good leader. It means you have to be an effective communicator. And I think that people misconstrue what the green dot does as far as the green dot's like the captain, right? The captain patch right over here. So to me is that you have to be able to communicate to the team what you want. And Amani Hooker is not going to be here for forever, more than likely, I would assume. Tea leaves would tell me that the way they've treated safety in this offseason, that yes, Amani Hooker's here for now, but I don't know how long they'll value the safety position, especially if he can't stay healthy. So to me, no, the players should not vote on it. Players do not vote on green dots. They can vote on team captains all they want, but you got to let Cedric Gray do it. That's what you drafted him to do, right? You drafted him to play the linebacker next to Kenneth Murray. You drafted him to play that spot. He's got to go ahead and start doing it.
I just
so
kind of
that's
feel
just where
like
I'm at.
I don't mean to throw shade at Amani Hooker. Amani Hooker's just driving around Nashville catching strays, listening to football and other F words. But the impression I had of him was that he was kind of a quiet guy. And I just wondered how much that would impact his ability to communicate those things and, just like the instinctual, like getting from thought to spoken word to his teammates, that kind of
Yeah.
aspect of it.
But again, you got to be able to stay healthy and be reliable. I would
That too.
rely. I'm just. Let's do it. This is what you drafted him to do. Let him do it from day one. Now, if he sucks at it and he can't do it, then we have a totally different conversation. But I think that the guy that needs to have the snaps, the first shot on it, and the most shots at it needs to be Cedric Gray. So
Yeah.
there we go on Cedric Gray. Both love Cedric Gray, by the way, right? I don't think we have
Yeah.
any.
Oh yeah. He
qualms about
was
that pick.
there were 4 linebackers, like middle round guys that I thought had the traits and the ability to fill that role, and Gray was one of them. Yeah. Not the one I would have picked, but I'm not going to hate on the pick at all.
Uh, okay, so let's move on to Jarvis Brownlee Jr. Dog. Gonna be a contributor, gonna be a major contributor in the sense that I would not be surprised if he saw 50% of the defensive snaps by the end of the year.
Yeah.
People will think that's a really high number, but it's really not that high when you talk about spread formations and wide receivers and all that kind of stuff and people getting rest. But I think that this guy is going to play on special teams. He's going to play inside, outside on defense. I am super excited. We both loved us some Jarvis Brownlee Jr. I mean, at the end of the day, I think it's a great pick that people probably at first are like, why are you drafting a corner? But we have said on this show, on Football and Other F Words, and on a football show, and I'm sure they said it on Hot Read Podcast, you need 4 corners. And now
Yep.
you have 4 corners. And you have a guy that can come in and say, hey, if Roger McCreary goes down, Jarvis Brownlee Jr. If Roger McCreary is still healthy and Cheeto goes down, Jarvis Brownlee Jr. goes to the outside. That's what you have. You have the flexibility. He is an inside-outside guy. He is your definitive cornerback 4.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think if you had asked me before the draft, Stoney, can you name one player that you are 100% confident is going to be a Tennessee Titan by the end of the weekend? I think my answer would have been Jarvis Brownlee Jr. because he just feels like he was molded for this Titans defense and to play under Denard Wilson with what we know about what they're looking for in players. He has some really good qualities that I think give him outside inside versatility. Me personally, I would play him outside, but I understand that injuries, other needs may necessitate you just got to play him wherever you can play him. But I think this is a guy that's really physical at the line. I think he's a guy that can run a route for a wide receiver, just has the sense to undercut a route, get his hand in, break up a pass. But the trait that I really love about him the most, that really feels polished, is on the tape. You see instances where he is beat deep, where the wide receiver kind of gets behind him, and instead of like panicking and lunging, grabbing, that sort of thing, he just kind of positions himself. It's a very savvy, nuanced move. He kind of positions himself so that the quarterback has to throw over Brownlee ahead of the wide receiver, timed perfectly to drop it into a bucket in order to complete a pass. And that's some really heady, advanced cornerback play in my book. And when you see that kind of stuff on the tape, compared with the mentality, alongside him just completely, body slamming Johnny Wilson on a play, who is a gargantuan tight end, wide receiver, Freudian slip there. Johnny Wilson, this gargantuan wide receiver, is just getting tossed to the ground, slung down by Jarvis Brownlee Jr. So you pair the physicality, the dog mentality with the nuance, the polish with which he plays. No, I don't think he's the fastest guy. I don't think he's the twitchiest guy, but he's one of the headiest guys out there on the field. And I think this is going to be an incredible addition to this Titans secondary that makes them 4 deep at really good cornerbacks.
Both him and not Jaquan Jackson, both Jarvis Brownlee Jr. and Cedric Gray, I thought were surprising picks to still be there at the time that they were picked.
Yes, for sure. I'm with you.
And so I would lump them both in that spot. We'll get to Jaquan Jackson when Mike comes hopefully comes back. Because I also want to save Jaquan Jackson for him because I know he wants to talk about some JJ there. So let's talk about James Williams. And we talked a little bit about James Williams, but what is his impact on the depth chart, in your opinion? Because I look at it and I go, okay, so this sort of pushes Jack Gibby down, but it doesn't really because Jack Gibby probably still fills in and rotates for, I would assume at this point, rotate for Cedric Gray. That maybe things change and they want to put Otis Reese as that rotational guy. And if they put Otis Reese as the rotational guy, then okay, well then James Williams the rotational guy for likely maybe Kenneth Murray or the replacement for him. So then I can kind of see it. But it's almost like he's fifth linebacker right now, but he's going to have a real shot to. I think one of the big headlines from training camp, and one of them, and this may be a good time to bring up one of the questions from because there was someone that had asked about training camp. So in my mind, I'm kind of looking at it and I go, man, James Williams is going to be that guy that's going to be like flying around at practice that everybody's going to be excited about. How confident are you in that being that?
Yeah, I mean, I think he can absolutely be that. I think right now, day one, he can, if you have him in situations where it is like see ball, get ball kind of deal, like just crash on the play and knock the fuck out of somebody. I think that's James Williams. I think he has trouble downfield diagnosing plays. And I will borrow a quote from our buddy James Foster, who posted a cut up of James Williams and said, good or bad, when James Williams is on the field, something is going to happen. I think that's a great way to look at the James Williams pick, but I don't know where he fits into the rotation. And I know that doesn't make for good analysis on this show, but I don't know what you do with him, because we talked about on the stream, like, is he third world Kyle Hamilton for Denard Wilson? Like, are you going to use him deep to kind of patrol the deep part of the field? Is he going to be a linebacker playing up at the line of scrimmage? I just don't know, because his size, and I think it's the agility for me. Those two things kind of limit, right? He's probably too big to be a safety, but I don't know that he's agile enough to be a real patroller in the middle of the defense. And I think that's where I just kind of want to wait and see how they use him. But I think there's a lot of potential. I think that he does help that mindset, right? I talked about tone setters at the beginning of the show. I think James Williams is absolutely a tone setter. So I'm really intrigued. I might be more intrigued to see how they use him more than maybe any of the other prospects that they drafted.
Mike, where do you see, because the question is, where do you see James Williams on the step chart? Because it's kind of like you don't really know where he fits other than special teams, right? I mean, like right away, you got a gunner that's likely going to make some, like, he's going to regret people. He's going to get so many fines, I feel like, and regret the NFL's decision on this new kickoff rule, because he's going to murder someone on that field.
I think that is probably his best use initially is just going to be a go hunt the guy with the ball kind of guy on special teams. I mean, the dude has like such special characteristics just from a length standpoint, size standpoint, athleticism, all that stuff. And he's extremely violent and physical. So I think he's perfect for special teams. But I kind of do think he fits where he fits in, and it's probably not going to be like year one getting snaps in the defense kind of deal for him, because I do think he's going to require a lot of development and work playing, making the transition to linebacker. But I think he's going to be like a will linebacker, and I think in an ideal world for the Titans, he is your successor to Kenneth Murray. Sooner rather than later, hopefully, for those of us who are not big Kenneth Murray fans. But I think he fits in the Kenneth Murray role better than anything. And alongside, ideally, like Cedric Gray's your Mike, Kenneth Murray, James Williams are your Wills. I think Otis Reese also is probably – I think Otis Reese can play a little bit of both, actually, which is interesting, but, maybe ideally suited to more of a Will role long term. And then, of course, Jack Gibbons is in that Mike side, too. So I think those are your five linebackers. I think you feel okay about that if Cedric Gray hits. which I think he will. But yeah, I kind of think that's where he's going to be. And I think James Williams will absolutely make the roster for special teams purposes, if nothing else. Plus, I mean, he's like a moldable ball of clay right now, like super high athleticism stuff, just needs to be coached. And I think if you can get something out of him, I think he's got a lot of upside as a potential linebacker in this league.
I'll say this, man. I've spent a lot of time this offseason like talking about the 49ers linebackers, the Baltimore Ravens linebackers, and I think at the fullest extent of this vision, if they can kind of, like you said, Mike, coach James Williams up, I think the idea of Gray and Williams kind of being this linebacking duo for this team with the traits that they have, the dog mentality that we keep talking about, I think that's a pretty exciting thing. If they can just get that out of James Williams and Cedric Gray hits, like it could be a pretty exciting pairing on down the road.
Hey, listen, maybe for once we'll actually see Frank Bush develop a linebacker.
How about that?
Everybody acts like he's developed all these great linebackers, and nobody can name me one that he's actually developed. So maybe this will be the one. Mike, I want to get through a couple of the questions that you may have missed or anything like that. The first question, and just real quick answers. First question is what UFL team will Julius Chestnut be playing for next year?
The Tennessee Titans.
No, he'll be off this team this year. I guarantee it. Dylan Johnson's come taking it. So you're wrong there. So moving on, you're already wrong.
Dylan Johnson, Chestnut, I think is an interesting camp battle for RB3.
It's about as interesting as whatever that tight end you said, oh, he's good. He's pretty interesting. Whatever hobbies he's fucking that's got you interested. I don't even know what that tight end
David,
name is.
I can't remember.
3 names.
Yeah,
the kid from Temple?
Long name.
Yeah, the guy from Temple.
Yeah,
DMR or something like that, I think.
Yeah. Okay, so what's your take on valuing RAS going forward? Because I put it out there like this. This team has access to athletic data that matters, that's from the game. So, and they have Sumer Sports. Maybe they have Sumer Sports access, maybe they don't. But there's like Sumer Sports. There's PFF that has a deep back end. There's Amazon, the AWS stuff for next gen stats, a bunch of stuff that we don't have access to. And I think a lot of people are down on this RAS score. So I ask you, do we just need to start maybe temporarily adjusting how we view RAS in the lens of Tennessee Titans?
I think so. I mean, I think RAS is valuable. Like, it's a valuable input because really what I want to see isn't like the overall RAS score, which I think is not that great, but looking at the individual stuff, because my problem is like Mock Draftable does all that stuff, but it only includes combine data. It does not include any pro day, which I do think the pro day data, because sometimes that's all we get for guys, or sometimes they'll only do certain drills there or whatever. So I think being able to look at where those guys slot in percentile wise on vertical or whatever, but it lets you kind of look at like what stuff is important for that position. I don't think the overall RAS number is like a huge data point for me to consider. I mean, obviously, if a guy's elite at everything, he's elite at everything. You can kind of just see that. But I think it's it's a data point. I don't think it's a particularly important one overall.
Yeah, I think that someone, and I'll phrase a question to Cindy Easton to talk about, where do they get their athletic information from and all that kind of stuff. Because I think that's something fans need to hear, because I mean, we have been the biggest champions the last 4 years about RAS. And I think this is the first year that really I've started seeing the cracks and the flaws within RAS and then holding it up as testament. So I think there's probably more in-game data that we're not sure on. We saved Tavondre Sweat talk for you, but is there anything, and we talked about J.C. Latham being a left tackle. We talked about trusting Bill Callahan and anybody who even leaves open the door to the idea that maybe, the 101, consensus mock drafters or the 7, Bleacher Reporters that, contribute to the mock draft of these consensus ones know more than Bill Callahan about offensive line is asinine. It's such an asinine take. Can't believe it that it was even put out on Twitter. Someone actually typed that out. So is there anything else you want to add to the J.C. Latham talk that likely we probably have not covered? I did direct people to your paulkarski.com article.
Yeah, I think I covered a lot of it in there, but look, one thing I will say, I think he'll be fine at left tackle because I don't like, and Callahan said this too, and I think Callahan, to me, like based on his comments after the pick, he is in my boat of he does not care right tackle versus left tackle. I don't think he sees there's a huge value gap between the two positions. He said the traits are the same for the two positions. It's not like they're looking for a big mauler at right tackle and a little, dancing bear at left tackle. There's not like a huge, calculation difference there. So I think he's going to be fine at left tackle because it's really just a comfort thing of can you mirror what your body's memory, like your whatever. I'm thinking of a word and it's not coming to mind.
Well, he needs to
muscle memory.
It's like
muscle
riding
memory.
a bike, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
it's riding a bike. He's got to just get his muscle memory back up to date because he's already played left tackle, so he kind of has all that stuff.
So can you mirror all those movement skills and still feel comfortable and be at your best self, which I think if he's going to rep it out all summer, he can get back into that groove where he was in high school and everything like that. So I think he's going to be fine over there. But I will say this, if he's not, I don't give a shit. I still think if you want to get a good right tackle, go get a good right tackle. You can play an NPF at left tackle and he can suck over there just as much as he can suck at right tackle. So, I don't think it really matters that much. And I think the Titans would agree with that.
Okay, real quick, and this will be the last one we get to before we talk about Tavondre Sweat. We'll try to get to Jalen Harrell, but there's some really good questions that maybe we can work in some Jalen Harrell over here in that. But I really want to get to Tavondre Sweat. But Cedric Gray, my feeling is that they drafted him. He's green dot capable. Day one at camp, he needs to be the green dot. Don't fuck around and just let him learn and go through the growing pains unless it becomes too unbearable and too much of a disaster, which says a lot about the pick. But I think they just need to throw him in the fire. You throw him in the deep end of the pool. Your thoughts? Then we fool around with the Monty Hooker bullshit.
Yeah, no, I agree with you on that. I think you get him in there as quick as possible. And the benefit is that nobody knows this defense right now. I mean, he's going to be joining he's going to be learning it right alongside Amani Hooker. Cedric Gray's a guy that has a ton of college experience, was, a two-time captain for North Carolina, played, starter for 3 years, had over 100 tackles for 3 straight years. Like, this dude has a ton of reps at a pretty high level. I think he's going to be pretty capable of handling it right away based on everything that I've read about him. And I just think that this is a guy that, you throw him in the deep end and let him grab it from the jump. Because I also think he's a leader. I think he's a guy that people will want to follow. So you can only really lead if you're on the field. So get him out there to let him play.
Okay. Whew. The Tavondre Sweat pick, everybody.
Oh,
that was some of the.
it.
I haven't seen that much anger about a pick since from me, Isaiah Wilson, and from me, Des Fitzpatrick, and from me, Monty Rice. A lot of picks that I fucking hated for this team that really sent me over the deep end. But Tavondre Sweat, and I think that there's a lot of people. Okay, let's see how the best that way I could put this, and let me get your thoughts. I think a lot of people are just too conditioned to focus in on the negative and not read the positive. And I think that people are taking, David Krumholtz, who's an actor, by the way. David Krumholtz, I don't know why he was the first guy that popped in my name. David Krumholtz, wrote at Bleacher Report that he doesn't do this or he doesn't do that. And people are like, well, then everybody says that. It's like, well, he has conditioning issues or he has maturity issues, but are ignoring the fact that Dane Brugler, who mentions that he used to have that stuff, says that both things were much improved. Like, they're just ignoring the positive part. And I think people just pigeonholed themselves before the draft. They backed themselves into a corner, and they said that Sweat's a run-stuffing nose tackle, or they said you don't draft defensive linemen in the first or second round. You don't do this. You don't do that. He's a party animal. He's lazy. He's fat. I mean, there's so much negative out there before the draft about Tavondre Sweat that they're in a corner, and then they lash out, right? Like, they lash out. And then they calm down, they watch film and maybe, change some stuff. And that happens constantly. It didn't happen with me with Isaiah Wilson. You almost got me with Block of Thickness back in then. And you almost got me. But
Look,
I'm glad to
if
stay
Isaiah,
never worked with me
Isaiah
on Monty
Wilson,
Rice.
I'll go to my grave saying Isaiah Wilson had a skill set to be a good right tackle in the NFL if
Yeah.
he had any interest in doing so whatsoever, which he did not.
Yeah. Hey, listen, and I still agree. Never Levis. I will always maintain never Levis. But I will say that I think that is a good example of me, going with never Levis, but to be honest, I was fine with him in the second round. I just wasn't there for him in the first round. So I ate my medicine, put a little Kentucky flag in the back of my my office, so we're all good there. I will say this, that I think a lot of this stuff is overblown and comes from a place of box score scouting mixed with not watching the games before this. So, like, there's a mixture, right? So I think box score scouting has still existed in a lot of these narratives.
That's
And I
the
think the
worst.
other thing is that, like, some of the stuff got kind of like, I just don't think that people watched the tape before the pick. And I that's fine. I mean, I don't, not everybody
Or
can
even
watch
watch Texas games, period. Like, I'm not even
right.
asking you to dive into all 22. I'm just asking you to watch some Texas games on the
Yeah.
TV because you can always see him. And he's pretty
Yeah.
noticeable.
Well, I mean, here's the thing. If you're a shitty player, you don't win the Outland Trophy, right? Like, if you're a shitty college player and your tape is awful, you do not win the Outland Trophy. And it's very hard for a defensive lineman to win the Outland Trophy over an offensive lineman. It usually almost always goes to offensive linemen. And so he, for the last 15 years, is like Aaron and Dominican Sue, Aaron Donald, is either Jalen Carter or Jordan Davis, can't remember which one, and someone else. I mean, they're all successes. Whoever won these Outland trophies from the defensive side are all successes. So I don't understand. And I'm an Alabama fan, and I know that Tavondre Sweat wrecked some shop in the Alabama game. Like, I think that was the clip that you showed today, Stoney, if I'm not mistaken. Like, he threw the right guard into Jalen Milroe's
That was
lap.
Oklahoma.
That was the Oklahoma game. Yeah.
That was the Oklahoma game.
Yeah. I liked watching the Alabama game too, though, because there's so many, and it is something like it's hard to hold it against people, because if you're not watching the all 22 and seeing like the full context of a play, and you don't have the ability to sit and rewind, slow-mo, like see every little movement, all of the things that compile to make the play a success or a failure. If you don't see that stuff, it is kind of hard to see the victories. But I was dying laughing because he has a ton of like almost plays on his tape too. And there was a play in the Texas game where he just completely collapsed the pocket one-on-one with the center, and or the Texas Alabama game is I like that, where he like completely collapses the pocket and Quinn Ewers just panics and just throws the ball like as hard as he can down the field. And it expands, and you see like downfield, Xavier Worthy's running with one of the Alabama defensive backs, and Xavier Worthy has to adjust like 5 yards out of his catch radius to make this miracle catch, and it's a completion. But you're watching it, and you're like, how the hell did that even happen? Like, and those are the things that I don't think show up in any quantifiable way unless you're actually watching the tape and getting the full context on plays like that. And I feel like rewatching him, that's who I'm doing for Film Friday this week. Rewatching him, I've made it through the Alabama game, the Oklahoma game, the Rice game, the TCU game, and I'm working on Washington right now. And there's plays like that in every game where it's like, that shouldn't have happened because Tavondre Sweat, that was a play Tavondre Sweat made, that it just the miracle, the football gods were shining on the quarterback that day or something.
Well, and Mike, I'll ask you this. You've watched a lot of Texas games. You've talked about Tavondre Sweat and Byron Murphy, and you've talked about all diabetes Mitchell and a little boy Xavier Worthy. I mean, you talk about them ad nauseum. But I think everybody's been impressed with Tavondre Sweat's growth over his 4 years at Texas. And you're the Texas fan. I mean, let's talk about the growth and maturity and the conditioning, because even at 300 and hell, just call it 390, because that's, everybody says he's high 380s. He won the Outland Trophy and did everything that he did, supposedly out of shape and not conditioned, even though everybody says he has improved condition in 2023. But I agree, he could stand to lose some pounds, but he did all of that at 390 and is already down to 366 a few short months after being around that time. He's putting in the work. We saw everybody saw the clip. Listen, you can say all you want that, like, just like people say with the Rand Carthon getting texts from a GM or whatever, that like every NFL draft or player is putting in the work and saying all that stuff. Isaiah Wilson wasn't. I mean, he went to the rap studio. So like, and it was like going to college parties and playing video games. Well, don't tell me that every player does that when we've seen that Traylon Burks shows up out of shape and because he didn't put in the proper work and he put in different kind of work and all this stuff. So we can't say specifically for Tennessee Titans, we can't specifically say that is the case. But you, as a Texas fan, you're on those message boards. You're a weirdo. What are your feelings generally about T'Vondre Sweat, his conditioning, his personality, and all that kind of stuff?
Listen, the narrative about Sweat, and it's funny because all this stuff came out in the pre-draft process about him being a party animal, not taking stuff seriously, all that stuff. All those quotes came out. But the funny thing is that that's all so old news. Like that stuff goes back to 2021. And in 2021, there was, and I don't know how viral this went outside of Texas fans, but it was extremely viral within the Texas fan base. There is a clip of Bo Davis, the defensive line coach for Texas, on the team bus after I think it was a 30-7 loss to Iowa State. They had led the game 7-3 at the half and just got destroyed in the second half in Ames. But they're on the bus on the way back, I guess, to the airport. And Bo Davis is lighting them up about, if you don't take this thing seriously, y'all are on the bus here laughing. If you want to be like that, get your ass in the portal. I mean, it was very not safe for work video. If you want to look up, all you have to do is type Bo Davis rant and you can find it. There's videos of it still floating around. That was directed at T'Vondre Sweat. And that has been confirmed, I think, from inside the Texas program that Sweat was the target of that rant. He was cutting up, laughing after a bad loss, and Bo Davis had enough. And look, Texas has gone through a major culture shift under Steve Sarkisian. And I know, people bag on Sark for what happened in his early days coaching at USC in Washington. But by all reports,
if anybody can relate to Sweat and his partying days and get the message through, it's Sark, right? Well, I mean, like, that's technically right.
It's been like for a complete culture shift within that building. That the guys that they inherited from Tom Herman, a lot of those guys were reaches based on trying to get stars in the building, bump up their recruiting class ranking, all this other stuff. That there's been a big culture shift, and the easy thing for T'Vondre Sweat to do after that rant, where he literally was telling him to get in the portal if that's the way he was going to be, would be to just go get in the portal. He stuck around at Texas. After that, he, by all reports, committed. The next season, he has a huge step forward. I mean, Keandre Coburn, who is currently a Titans nose tackle, was the starter. He had been there for a long time. Been a pretty good player for them. And then Moro Ojomo was the other starter. Both guys that got drafted last year late, but pretty talented players. And Sweat was clearly the best defensive lineman on that team in 2022. Like, he didn't get the snaps because he was kind of waiting his turn. They do rotate a lot on the defensive line, which I know you talked about at stackingtheunderbox.com. I thought that piece was great, by the way. They rotate a lot on the defensive line at Texas, and that's just a philosophy thing. But Sweat was playing a good bit of snaps and was clearly the best one. And then when he takes a step forward to being the guy in 2023, he was the best player in the country at his position. Like, I just don't know how anybody could have watched Texas. I'm in Texas group chats, like you said. I'm in the message boards. I'm deep in the streets, right, with Texas. Everybody, if you ask,
69 is your handle on the message boards. Right?
That's exactly right. If you would poll 100 Texas fans and say who was the best defensive player for Texas last year, over 90% would say T'Vondre Sweat. Byron Murphy was great. I think I understand the Byron Murphy intrigue, but there's no question that Sweat had more of an impact on the Texas defense than Murphy did last year. No question at all. So I just don't. I don't know how you could have watched that team play, watched the impact that he had. They had the third best run defense in college football last year. almost exclusively because of Devondre Sweat. You cannot single block him. They could not single block him at the college level at all. If you single blocked him, whether the play was to him or away from him, it was over. You're done. You're going to have a tackle for loss. And it may not be him creating the tackle for loss, which, as Stoney pointed out, the box score scouting, is a little out of control on this thing. But he creates tackles for loss for so many other players because he is, either creating penetration, forcing the back to stop his feet, choose a different hole, try to get back to the backside of the play, whatever it may be, and being tackled for a loss there. Or, he's taking up multiple blockers and creating free lanes for Jalen Ford and all these other linebackers to run through and make tackles. He changes the math for your defense just by his presence alone. And I think putting him with Simmons puts these offensive lines in such a horrible position now because you're not going to be able to single block either of those guys on a regular basis and win in the middle of that defense. I just don't think it's going to happen. You're not going to push Devondre Sweat back. You're not going to push Jeffrey Simmons back out of the hole. That is going to be an immovable rock in front of those inside linebackers, Cedric Gray and Kenneth Murray and all these guys. I mean, they're never going to have it better than what they have it this year with Jeffrey Simmons and Devondre Sweat, playing in front of them. So I think it's I think Sweat's a phenomenal player. I think he's a better pass rusher than he gets credit for. His pass rush win rate and all that other stuff, pressures, you look at all those numbers, really, really good, like better than a lot of the guys who were, quote unquote, designated pass rushers in this defensive tackle class, like Braden Fisk, who, I don't think many people would have batted an eye at 38. He had a better pass rush win rate than Braden Fisk, in addition to being a much better run defender than Braden Fisk.
Higher snap count per game, by the way, as well, than Braden Fisk.
Absolutely. Yeah, he played a ton of snaps. He played more snaps than Byron Murphy, as you pointed out, more snaps on third downs, more snaps against passing situations. He was an every down player for Texas. And I think he can be an every down player for the Titans. Now, whether they're going to put him in on sub packages when they want to go light and really get after the passer, I don't know. I think Jeffrey Simmons is still going to probably be the heavy in those packages, and then they're going to bring Arden Key to rush on the inside. And, but I don't know. This edge group is so thin, maybe they don't want to put 3 edges on the field on third downs. But we'll see on that. But either way, I think he's going to be a massively impactful player. I know where he was ranked on some of the big boards, but there's other big boards that had him in the top 30 too, right? So I mean, we're talking about huge variance.
Yeah, Lynn Zierlein had him right at 30, if I'm not mistaken.
Exactly. So,
and Dave Brugler had him at 33 before he had the DWI, and again, we were on this show. I was on a football show. I wrote about it. I said, please do not think that just because that other teams are going to move him down the board, and this was at the time. And I've written about it since many times, but just because you think that doesn't mean that NFL teams do. And I'm telling you, you look at the defensive lineman that went off the board shortly after him, one of those teams would have taken him if it wasn't for the Tennessee Titans taking him. So that guy would have been gone. He would have been gone and declared a reach for that other team who are basing their information off their own personal big boards, which were obviously influenced heavily by the DWI situation, which the Tennessee Titans and other teams were not going to heavily influence their board on that. If they only do it in severe cases, and unfortunately, this was not a severe case at all. And let me say this about the snap counts. I went and looked at the snap counts per game in 2023 of the top 20 highest paid interior defenders. So the top 20, 47.6 snaps per game. And keep in mind, he played 35.9. You're telling me you couldn't get him, you don't think that he can at least get to 47.6 snaps per game? I looked at the top 12 drafted off defensive linemen in this class. So there was 12, not including edge, and they were deemed by PFF as interior defenders in college. And they all went in the first through fourth rounds. They averaged 38.6. And by far, Johnny Newton was the highest at 62.4. It goes 62.4, and the next highest was 48.5. And so he was only a couple of snaps below the average of that group. And that is mainly because of Jerzon Newton. And I say again, just so everybody knows, they had four interior defenders, not including sub packages where he may have came out, but four interior defenders that had 355 snaps or more. The next highest one was over 200 on that team. So they had 5 guys that played a lot of snaps. There's also the margin of victory. They had 7 games that were considered a blowout where they won on an average of 30.4 points per game. Your Byron Murphys and your Tavondre Sweats are not going to be playing a lot, regardless of what you view as their conditioning thing. Here's the thing. Even if he was not conditioned, right, and let's say he was out of shape and out of weight, they still would rather have him on the field for pass rushing snaps more than they wanted Byron Murphy. You call that coaching malpractice, I don't know, but my God, he's already down to 366. They seem to have a plan that he wants to get down to around 355. Holy shit. I mean, I am just so fucking ecstatic about this pick. I mean, and I said I would be at the Senior Bowl, and I still would be, and I'm all in. Like, I'm all in on this pick. I thought it was going to be the pick that night. I'm on it. I'm on it.
But
Go ahead, Mike.
Two other things. I got kind of off the personality track when we were talking about that. I will say that he is a goofy personality. Like, he is like a gregarious kind of guy. He's a goofball, like that kind of thing. Like, that is his personality. Now he has a switch that he flips when he goes on the field, and he plays mean, right? Like, he does not play like a goofball. But one of the things that if you know people within like the Texas building or hear things from within the Texas building, he's one of the guys that was able to connect with like every single player on the team. And so he was a very popular figure within that locker room. And I don't think he's a problem child. Like, he is not a bad guy. Yes, he's made mistakes. Yes, he's had, issues during his time at Texas, but I don't think he's a bad guy. I think he's a big personality. I think he's friendly. I think he's going to be a popular guy for the Titans locker room, and frankly, probably a popular guy in Nashville if he performs the way he's capable of. So I think his personality probably has taken way too many hits for what it really is.
I have a couple of things to add real quick before a quick stat correction. I believe earlier I said that Tavondre Sweat blew up a play between Quinn Ewers and Xavier Worthy. That's what my notes said, but that does not make sense. So let's just change that to Jalen Milroe and an unnamed Alabama wide receiver that I don't remember because I jotted down Xavier Worthy in my notes. Anyway, I would also add there was a play in the Washington game where Tavondre Sweat walks down the center, just north-south, straight up, and the other defensive lineman tries to cross inside to get to the quarterback, and the left guard literally cannot get to the rusher because Tavondre Sweat is just in the way. So even when he is not trying to block 2 people, he is getting in the way and blocking 2 people.
Yeah, he plays with power, as some would say. Strength, grown man strength is what the in his pass rush sets. He has grown man strength, according to Dane Brugler. And also, according to scouts, he reminds them of that scene in Mario where Donkey Kong just beats the shit out of Mario. I think Greg Cosell said bull rush and pass rushing moves. I've seen a couple of other people say that he has the bull rush in the pass rushing moves. He has all kinds of different ways to win.
Good hands.
Maybe he doesn't have to use every different. Yeah, he doesn't have to. Here's the thing. Not every offensive lineman requires that you use a bull rush. Not every offensive lineman requires that you use your hands. There are some ways and different ways you have to beat. And there is just a lot of double teams. I mean, my God, I'm sure he has a high double team rate on his film.
Teams double team the shit out of him.
We may get to Jalen Harrell in our questions, but I want to get to some of some of these quick questions because I know that Stoney has to get off here soon. This is from Kenneth Krall at Texas Sports 1015. These will all be from X. What is the biggest hole in the roster besides safety? Mike.
Edge rusher. Easily.
Stoney.
Right tackle.
Oh, wow. I guess so. Yeah, I guess, man, you really love Jalen Harrell and Rashad Weaver and Caleb Murphy more than you love NPF and them. I was gonna say
I think
backup
so.
left tackle. I think that's the biggest hole because once JC Latham goes down, or if JC Latham were to go down, this whole thing just kind of crumbles. What do you want to see the most in training camp? And Mike, well, you won't be at training camp this year because you're in Texas. But what do you want to see the most coming out of training camp? Also by Kevin.
I might make a special trip, but I'll say I want to see Tavondre Sweat at 350 pounds, and I want to see what JC Latham looks like. Those are going to be huge parts of what this team ends up becoming because they need them to be good right away and to be starters right away. So I think those top 2 picks are what I'm going to be most excited to watch.
To call back
Stoney?
to a conversation from earlier, I want to see Cedric Gray running with the ones.
I like it. I'm going to tie it into this one. By selecting a wide receiver later in the draft, do you think that speaks to their views of Burks in any way? And I do think it does. And you can shake your head that it doesn't, but I have it on good authority that it does. And I'm not caring about what Brian Callahan said on Ramon and Foster's stuff that I have heard, that they are very high on Burks and have plans to get Burks some targets and let him win. And so they,
wait.
wrong.
So you're saying that whether it matters as far as their view of Burks, like I was taking that as like that they drafted a wide receiver and that's because they want to replace Burks. I don't think
No. He's saying by selecting a wide receiver later in the draft, do you think that speaks to their view of Burks in any way? My big thing I want to watch in training camp is Treylon Burks because I do think they want to get Treylon Burks involved in the offense, and I think they view him as, for lack of a better phrase, because everybody assumes wide receiver 3 equals slot, I think they view Treylon Burks as their wide receiver 3. And not slot wide receiver, by the way.
Yeah, and I kind of feel like
both questions.
You guys tell me if I'm off base here, but I kind of feel like Jaquan Jackson's a better fit for the slot anyway. Like I kind of feel like they've got the slot covered with this pick, and it almost has nothing to do with Treylon Burks.
Yeah, I think what he's saying is in the sense of, and this is Ed Henry, but the general on Twitter, I think that what he's saying is like they must love Treylon Burks or like him enough not to reach on a wide receiver or whatever.
I don't think so. I don't think the board felt great for them with the receiver at any of their picks, especially, the really impactful pick would have been 38 to use there anyways. And I think that if they had, eyes for anybody, it was probably Ladd McConkey. And he went, in the first round? So I think the way that the board fell, or no, he went early in the second. Either way, I think the way the board fell for them, I don't think any of the receivers that they really coveted were available at any of those early spots, so they went elsewhere. I think if it had broke differently, maybe we'd be having a different conversation about all this. But yeah, I don't know that it says anything about Burks either way. I think he'll be their third best wide receiver. He'll see the third most snaps. I don't think he's going to see 90% of his snaps in the slot.
Yeah. These next 3 questions will be from the Canadian Titan on Twitter. As you've started to cover the team more professionally, do you find it necessary to separate your fan reaction from your analytical reaction? Does this affect how you feel about the draft class? For me, I think it's just become natural over time that I've kind of evolved into that way. Nothing that I'm like consciously focused up because I'm still going to give you I've never felt that my fandom has clouded how I feel, but I do find myself, I guess, less emotional, but that's a real big, I'm still very emotional. So, but I also feel like my emotionality is almost 90% objectivity. So that's just kind of how I view it. Stoney?
Yeah, I would say I look at it like this. This is my team. I'm going to be a fan of this team, whether they win or lose, whether they suck or they're winning Super Bowls. So it doesn't matter. My level of objectivity doesn't matter. So what does it hurt to just be objective and assess the team as I see it? I would also say that I quit every other writing job I had 7 years ago because I wanted to do it my way. And I think to this day, I'm still doing it my way. So I kind of feel like not a whole lot has changed for me. And for some reason, people still keep letting me in the building sometimes. So
there you go. Mike?
Same for me. I root for them during the game, just as hard as I ever did. But I think when I sit down and talk about it afterwards, even on Twitter or whatever, even right after the game, I don't live and die with it. And I'm certainly not gonna, just go to bat for just Titans players or whatever for no reason, unless it's justified. So.
Did you notice any difference in this draft versus a J. Rob Vrabel / era draft? I guess not really, but I will say that it does feel like a more cohesive plan than maybe their plans and drafts towards the end of the tenuous relationship.
It's hard for me to say.
I'm with you guys. Like I kind of, I don't know.
All right, it's obviously it's too early to say, but which draft picks do you see as unlikely to make the 53-man roster? I go back and forth on this a little bit because I think that all of them do. But if I were to say the least likely, and you guys are going to call me crazy, I kind of like the least likely. So like 51% he's making the roster makes me feel like that's least likely right now. It's like 51%. That would be Jaquan Jackson, because I do think that here's the thing about it. It's a room where they've spent a lot of time finding returners, because Gabe Jeudy-Lally is the guy they put at the punt returner. And if Jaquan Jackson muffs punts and he doesn't do the return thing and he doesn't stand out against Kyle Phillips, who we know is a training camp hero, if he's just another Mason Kinsey, there's a good chance he could go to the practice squad. And because I think that Jalen Harrell right now, they obviously think that he's a 3-down player. I think he's better than Rashad Weaver. And I know we haven't talked about Jalen Harrell, but I do think he's better than Rashad Weaver and Caleb Murphy. They still haven't solved this rotational issue at edge too, but at least they do have two guys they can rotate in and out. And I think that James Williams will find, like, he will be the training camp guy, like the guy making all the wild plays, the splash plays. He's the guy that's going to be a gunner. Like I think they want Jaquan Jackson's role to be defined, but I don't think it's as defined as everybody else makes it out to be. That's my opinion.
I'm with you. The only thing I would add is that they've got so many numbers at wide receiver. I think there's far more competition for him than there is a guy like Jalen Harrell or James Williams.
Yeah, I'll third that. It's Jaquan Jackson.
I think we all think he was making the team, right? Like, yeah. I mean,
well, I think so. I would put him on my 53 if I had to make one right now. But I don't know that they're going to keep two punt / kick return / slot guys, right? Like, so I kind of think that that's one role for them that is going to be on the 53, and then they'll probably have one on the practice squad. So I think it's a him versus Kyle Phillips versus Kyrus Jackson versus Mason Kinsey, if you want to throw him in there, battle in camp. And one probably makes the 53. I don't think two do, most likely.
Draft related by Xander Merker, because he asked one that's not draft related, so I'm skipping it. What's one thing you would have done differently with the Tennessee Titans draft? And I think mine would have been Malik Washington over Jaquan Jackson. Real quick.
Same.
Malik Washington over Jaquan Jackson.
Yeah. That's what I figured. How confident are you on we're going to do this from a scale from 1 to 10. This is from Just a Fan at RG Tighten Up. How confident are you in the model that Callahan has set up in terms of his coaching staff, youth at senior positions, followed by experienced positional coaching spots? So I'm pretty confident in this staff. I think there is some concern with Frank Bush and maybe Chris Harris just a tad bit. But my biggest concern right now of all the coaches that they hired is with Frank Bush, but I'm supremely confident in their offense, the offense they've assembled. So I'd say I'd put that in 8.5 out of 10.
I'm pretty confident in it as well. And I'm willing to give, I don't know what Frank Bush really has to work with in this group right now. So I'm willing to give him a little bit of pass and wait and see on him.
Yeah, I'm at a 9 in confidence, because the other thing you can do is say, we're going to hire old head, coordinators and go younger at the position coach thing. But I honestly kind of like this setup better. You get the kind of younger, fresher look at the league at the top, setting the course, and then the experienced guys and implementing. So I kind of like the setup anyway. So I'll go 9.
We didn't get to a lot of the questions, all the players and everything, but we got to get going. I got one last question for you both, and this comes from Oh, crap. Oh, here we go. This comes from Adam C. on Twitter. Did Easton get his slippery refrigerator in the house? And that's where we're at right there. But that's what we'll end it on. There's a lot of questions that we'll get to in the coming weeks, and I got them all bookmarked, so I won't lose them. And I do want to get to Andrew ask a good question talking about scouts, which I think is a good topic for us to talk about later on. So we'll get to a lot of these questions. It's going to be a long summer. We're here every Wednesday, 1 p.m. Central Standard Time on the 440 Sports Network. You can read all of Mike's thoughts about the entire draft class over at paulkarski.com. If you want me to go back and write at paulkarski.com, you got to sponsor me. So go over there. If you got business, go talk to PK and get me a sponsorship, and I'll go right over at paulkarski.com. Other than that, you guys are hopefully all subscribers over at stackinginbox.com, where we have a Tavondre Sweat film room coming up on Friday by Stoney Keeley, which you can follow on Twitter at Stoney Keeley. Bluegrass Beverages are a sponsor. Couldn't be here without them. We really appreciate everything that they do, and we appreciate all the draft stuff. For Mike, for Stoney, my name is Zach. This has been Football and Other F Words, and you have just been effed.